your conference. There are 10 parties in conference, including yourself.
Made during this meeting, although staff will try to capture the intent of the comment. For written comment resolution by staff, please submit comments through the Federal Rulemaking website or mail comments to Cindy Blaney at the NRC as noted in the FRN. So there's an attendance sheet going around, also copies of the draft risks, as well as meeting feedback forms for those in attendance here at NRC headquarters. For those on the phone, you can provide feedback by going to the link on the public meeting schedule and pressing the feedback link associated.
Mute on.
So with that, we can have a short introduction here at headquarters. Once again, I am Jim Gaslovic, Office of New Reactors.
Brian Anderson, Office of New Reactors.
Ian Pasquale, Office of New Reactors.
Juarez Intron, Office of NMSS.
Tanya Mensa, Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulations.
Phil Gross, Nuclear Energy Institute.
Mark Nickel, Nuclear Energy Institute.
Dale Govan, Department of Energy.
Maria Vivas, Office of NMSS.
Mike Fitzgibbon, Office of Investigations, NRC. Thanks, Mike. And could we have, for those on the phone, please?
Mark Tannenbaum with Electric Power Research Institute.
Duke Energy.
I'm sorry, with Duke Energy?
Mute on.
Wu Lee with Ensor.
Steve Hamilton with Westinghouse.
Dave Hatcher, Nuclear Fuel Services.
Will Rogers, Lockheed Martin.
Erica Gray, Richmond, Virginia.
David Martin, Chester, Virginia.
Could the last two please repeat?
Erica Gray, Richmond, Virginia, Virginia Sierra Club.
Erica Gray.
David Martin, Martin Image News.
Okay, thank you. I'll tell you what, for those on the phone, just for clarity, on the meeting notice, you have my contact information, you have my email address. If you could just send me your contact info, I can easily add the correct spelling of your name and organization to the meeting summary in the attendees section. So,
Will do, thank you.
Thanks. To introduce the risk then. The draft risk was developed to heighten awareness of the existing NRC regulations and how they
Mute on.
affect items, as we'll use here CFSI, within the scope of NRC's regulatory jurisdiction. Addressees are expected to review the information of the draft risk and consider actions as appropriate to prevent CFSI from entering their supply chains, prevent possible installation or use of CFSI at their facilities, and also raise awareness of the potential for CFSI to be used in the manufacture of items, including sealed sources and devices. The risk has been written, its addressees section has been written to capture all stakeholders of the nuclear industry. The risk begins with a background section identifying generic communications previously issued regarding CFSI. And next, as we move into the summary of issues section, it is divided into three general areas of the nuclear industry, the first being reactors, second materials, and the third radioactive waste. So we have, as I mentioned, we have offered this public meeting to collect comments on the items that I mentioned just before. So we will open the floor up to those in the conference room. And then after we're done, we'll open the phone lines up. So those in attendance, any comments?
On the risk?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you guys were going to go through some explanations beforehand. Okay. Yeah, I'll lead off with some industry feedback on our thoughts on the. This is Mark Nickel, NEI, for those on the phone. On the risk. Generally, we think it's very well written. It does a good job of summarizing all of the regulations that are relevant to CFI. And how those regulations work. We think that The description contained in here supports the conclusion that the existing regulations provide adequate protection, that the actions taken by industry to comply with those regulations are sufficient, and therefore the conclusion being that no new regulations are necessary in relation to CFI, and no new industry actions specific to CFI are warranted. So we think that we agree with that conclusion. It may be helpful, just as a suggestion, it may be helpful to clarify that general conclusion in the risk, that what is described in here leads to the conclusion of adequate protection being provided in the face of CFI. There's one area that we'd like to discuss and understand better. It's in the area of the cybersecurity, how cybersecurity is addressed in here. It leads to some confusion, or at least we're confused on our part in terms of how it's addressed in here for a couple of reasons. One is that if we think of the applicable scope of the digital assets, it would be those that are safety related, which is already adequately discussed when the risk talks about Appendix B. So from that standpoint, it may not actually be necessary to go into specific discussion in the area of digital assets and cybersecurity. And it wasn't done for other types of components. It wasn't done for mechanical components, electrical components. So we're really not sure why there's a difference in level of detail there. And I don't think it's necessary. The other thing is it may actually be mixing two different issues, which might lead to our confusion. So if we think of CFSI coming from the standpoint of somebody's intent to deceive, a seller's intent to deceive for the motivation of earning extra profit, but which is different from something in here that's mentioned, which is malicious code. So malicious code isn't the intent to deceive for the purposes of profit. It's more the intent to do harm, injury, radiological sabotage. They're really two different things, and I think that leads to some of the confusion and how they're mixed in here together. It could be pointed out that malicious code could exist in authentic parts as well. So that's not really straightforward in here. There's one sentence in particular which really confused us quite a bit. It's on page 4. It's the second paragraph, and I'll read it. It starts out the second sentence, with the exception of potentially malicious code embedded in the software of digital electronic devices, parentheses, a regulatory issue under 10 CFR 73.54, and parentheses, comma, neither industry nor NRC staff has identified a new or unique failure mode associated with counterfeit or fraudulent item that could not be reasonably identified or eliminated by an effective NRC approved quality assurance program. We're really confused by the first part of that sentence. We certainly agree with the latter half of the sentence, that no new or unique failure mode associated with CFI have been identified. We really don't know where this statement about malicious code came from. We're not aware of a new failure mode. The NRC doesn't provide the basis within this risk, and we don't know of another NRC regulatory document that clarifies this. And since it doesn't go into any further description, it may. We don't believe it's really necessary here.
The first fragment of that sentence?
Yeah, the first fragment. Okay. Yeah, just before the comma. So, gotcha. Yeah, the neither industry starting that portion, we support that sentence. That's generally our comments. We'd be happy to discuss them and learn more during this meeting.
Okay, we did invite those on the working group to attend the meeting, but I'll just put it out there for any of those in the room or any of those on the phone from the NRC who wish to wish to answer any of these questions or make any comments. Otherwise, we're just on a listen mode right now, and we're primarily taking comments and capturing the intent.
And for those on the phone, this is Brian Anderson with the NRC. I'll add to what Jim just said. There were multiple agency experts that contributed to authoring this risk, and not everybody is either here in the room or on the phone to be able to engage in a dialogue. So we'll do the best we can with any questions that come up. But like Jim said, our primary goal here is just to solicit feedback and take any comments that you have. And as a reminder, any comments that are discussed here today, we would really appreciate those being added through either the regulations.gov website or submitted in writing to the NRC so that they can be dealt with as part of our finalization of this risk. And Mark, so I appreciate the comments. To make sure that I captured, you said several things. I think that at a high level, one comment that you had was the recommendation to include in a summary the conclusion about existing regulations or the NRC's regulatory framework being adequate to not require new rulemaking. I also heard you comment that we appear to have gone into detail on discussion with digital components, that we didn't necessarily go into that same level of detail for other non-digital types of components. Mm-hmm. And then discussion on malicious code and the fact that may not necessarily be driven by a profit-making.
It seems to be two different issues that are mixed here, and if it truly is an issue, I believe it's different from CFI. Maybe address it somewhere else, not within the body of this risk, but address it through a different regulatory vehicle. Okay.
So you obviously highlighted the sentence for us in the first full paragraph on page 4. Were there other locations in the risk specific to that we should be aware of now?
Well, there were 3 locations that mention the 7354, the cybersecurity rules. So one is in the addressees. So we think that if you strike the statement about the addressees also including digital assets under 7354, you would not exclude anybody. Everybody would still be addressed by this and without explicitly saying 7354. So the appropriate scope under that, which would be the safety related, are already covered by your other statements of addressees. So it's unnecessary. That's the first place. The second is the page 4 for the malicious code, which here it appears the NRC's it appears the NRC is establishing a new position that we're not aware of. And one, I don't believe it was the intent of the risk to establish a new position. The rest of the risk doesn't go into detail describing what this new position is, and it's probably a different issue that is being mixed in here. Doesn't need to be. The third location talking about it is on page 7, the last paragraph before the heading nuclear materials. It's a good description of Part 7354 and the reg guide. It doesn't appear necessary. This goes into more detail than the risk does for other types of components. So perhaps it's unnecessary, and would lead to the question why go into detail on digital components but not others. Okay. So just those 3 locations.
And so I won't try to provide a rationale for how or why it was authored the way that it was. For those on the phone, that a large part of the NRC's activities to to address counterfeit, fraudulent, and suspect items has been related to cybersecurity and implementation of relatively new NRC regulations on cybersecurity. So I think there was an intent by the multiple authors just to be comprehensive about the variety of areas that the NRC is focusing on. But I understand the comments and I appreciate the feedback. We'll take that back as part of our finalization of the documents. Any members of the NRC staff on the phone that want to add to what I just said, or try and address the question on cybersecurity or digital components? Okay, good, thanks. Anything else? Any other comments or feedback from inside the room here at NRC headquarters?
Okay, I'd like to open up the phone lines, please. Any comments? Questions?
Yes, hi. This is Erica Gray with Virginia Sierra Club.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I want to know how recently have fraudulent parts been detected in the supply chain?
I'm looking around the room. I'm searching for anybody who wants to offer answers to this. Otherwise, we'll just take this back as a takeaway. And Erica, we can talk offline later. But the purpose of this meeting will be to solicit comments specifically on the risks.
Erica, this is Brian Anderson with the NRC. I'll take a shot at answering your question by saying that the NRC is not aware of any significant infiltration of counterfeit or fraudulent items in any of the nuclear facilities that we regulate. If you have a draft copy of the risks, and it might not be in there, I might need to follow up with you separately. The NRC issued several information notices. The most recent one that I can think of that highlights examples of counterfeit or fraudulent items was back in 2008. The agency is aware of some counterfeit and fraudulent items that were detected before they ever entered nuclear plants. There are a small number of cases where counterfeit or fraudulent items were installed in what we call non-safety related systems, meaning in general those are systems that are not relied on to keep the reactor safe, to keep it cool in the event of needing to shut down, not systems that are not relied on to protect public health and safety. So with that in mind, the NRC issued this draft risk to try and clarify the existing requirements, the existing regulations that we have that would govern the issue of counterfeit and fraudulent items. And so you'll see in the draft that we've looked at the aspect from the point of view of reactors, nuclear materials, and radioactive waste licensees, just to highlight the quality assurance requirements that the NRC has that serve as a good protection against counterfeit and fraudulent items.
Okay, well, I'll have to go back and look at that document because I wasn't aware of this meeting until just recently. But I do see that TVA was cited for not testing nuclear parts. Federal regulators have cited TVA with 3 more apparent violations at Watts Bar Nuclear Plant, this time over thousands of parts that utility purchased that are not documented as nuclear grade quality. So I'm hoping that these new regulations, I heard earlier the gentleman said that everything's just fine, but this was dated March the 29th of 2013. So I'm sure hoping that the NRC, besides the cybersecurity risks that are obviously very high, but when it comes to parts, that we're making sure that these parts, valves, etc., are being tested and are definitely the grade that we need for security. And not fraudulent, obviously. I
agree wholeheartedly, and I think you'll find once you've had a chance to look at the at the draft document that we cover those regulations and how we think they connect to protecting against counterfeit and fraudulent items.
So they're going to be enhanced, correct?
We are not proposing any new regulations. We are highlighting the existing regulations and how they relate to protecting against counterfeit and fraudulent items. And in fact, the apparent violations and the news reports that you cite against TVA, you'll see that those same types of quality assurance requirements, those NRC regulations, are what's used to cite those apparent violations.
Well, like I said, I'll have to go back and go through the draft again. But as a citizen, I want to make sure that the NRC and the utilities are making sure that the parts they use are not fraudulent or defective. Safety first, safety in depth, I believe, is y'all's terminology.
Well, I certainly appreciate the feedback and appreciate the comment. This is certainly not your only opportunity to provide us a comment. The comment period is open, and in the Federal Register notice it describes how you can provide more information later. So this is not your only opportunity to provide us that feedback. But thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, hi, this is Dan Cronin from the University of Florida. I apologize, I came in late. One recommendation, if it hasn't already been provided, the nuclear reactor section, embedded in the middle of it, is a paragraph on non-power reactors. And I think it would benefit both the NRC and the non-power reactor licensees if maybe that was split out, either with a different header or split out into a different section. I don't see any issue with the information in the RIS itself, but by burying RTRs kind of in the middle of a bunch of power reactor guidance and regulation, it can be a little confusing as to what applies to who, if that makes any sense.
Comment taken. Yeah, as a first, attempt to grab a hold of the wide scope that this RIS is providing, which is agency-wide across the whole nuclear industry, a good starting point was to have nuclear reactors all located under one section. So we will take a look at highlighting that and making that more pronounced.
Thank you.
Other comments on the phone?
This is Mark Tannenbaum at EPRI. I was just looking at the third paragraph on page 7, and the second sentence says, nonetheless, licensees, applicants, and vendors may want to consider submitting voluntary reports. And I'm wondering if it would be clear if it pointed out that that is indeed a viable option when it's deemed warranted, and read something like licensees, applicants, and vendors can submit voluntary reports or are able to highlight that is an established means to communicate these types of issues.
Okay, thank you, Mark. If you could just repeat that one more time. I had a little delay in finding this section, this passage.
Sure. The second sentence reads, nonetheless, licensees, applicants, and vendors may want to consider submitting voluntary reports. And the comment was to maybe highlight that this is indeed a viable option when it's deemed warranted to report. Maybe it could read something like licensees, applicants, and vendors can submit voluntary reports or are able to submit voluntary reports. To point out that this capability, it already exists and is there to be used.
Okay, highlight the point that it's already available.
Yeah. Not only you might want to consider it, but you can do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mark, this is Brian Anderson. Just I think to try and highlight the intent of that discussion, part of what the message that we wanted to relay is that we the NRC, we don't consider Part 21 and 50.9 regulations to be de facto reporting schemes for counterfeit, fraudulent, and suspect items. And I think that's why we're looking to include the voluntary reporting language that's there. But I appreciate the feedback. We'll take a look at that again to make sure that we're really focused on the ability to get voluntary reporting information that doesn't necessarily have to fall under Part 21 or 50.9.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It doesn't necessarily need to reach that threshold for somebody to want to report it.
Thank you.
Other comments from the phone, please. Okay, does NRC staff here in the room or on the phone have any responses they would like to offer? Okay, so any other questions from here in the room, in the conference room? Any last comments from those on the phone?
Could I ask a question? I believe the NRC is writing a paper to the Mark Nicolini. I believe the NRC is writing a paper to the Commission. Could you just update us on what the schedule is for that?
This is Brian Anderson with the NRC. For those that might not know the history of what Mark's referring to, in 2011, the NRC staff wrote a policy paper to the NRC commissioners that outlined a series of actions that the staff would take to address counterfeit, fraudulent, and suspect items. The staff is currently preparing a follow-up paper to that 2011 set of actions to provide a status update on the work that the NRC has done since then. What I can tell you is that paper has been developed by the staff and it's being finalized through our management. I expect that paper will be published in the next month, but I can't be more specific on the timing beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, hello, this is Erica Gray again from Richmond. I'm having trouble finding the document. Can you please give me the proper information for that draft document?
On the draft risks?
Yes, please.
It can be found on the NRC's public website in the Adams search section under this number, ML, capital M, capital letter L, 14192 B as in boy 407.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we have no further comments, this meeting is adjourned.
Oh, excuse me, I do have one more question. How long will that comment period be for the public?
I'm looking at the Federal Register notice right now, and I believe it ends November 3rd this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
And there are instructions that we spoke of earlier. They're reiterated in the Federal Register notice for this risk on submitting formal comments. Those comments will be addressed in the comment summary for this risk. And comments taken today, we were mainly interested in gathering the intent on that. But if those on the phone could simply submit their name and organization to my email address on the meeting notice, it'd be greatly appreciated, because then your name and organization will be properly spelled in the meeting summary. So with that, I thank everybody, and meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.